How did you first get involved with Mary's Place? What was your role?
Well, Dan and McGrady, my legislative assistant, and I got invited to visit Mary's Place, and it was at the First Methodist Church, which was just a block away from City Hall. And at that time, it was just a Women's Day Center. And I don't exactly remember, but soon after that, I think Marty talked to us about the need for bus tickets. And Dan and I were able to get King County Metro to provide free bus tickets for the Mary's Place guests.
And what was your elected role at that time?
I was on Seattle City Council, and Dan was my legislative assistant. And then he went on to be very, very involved with Mary's Place.
What's your favorite memory of Mary's Place? A moment, interaction, or an experience that stands out for you?
Well, what I remember after that was that Mary's Place was honoring me with what was called a Heroes Award at their hats and tea lunch. I had no idea what that was. However, I found my way over to a big church on Mercer Island, and I went in, and what I found was many tables of women in their big hats. And then I recognized that each table represented a church that was supporting Mary's Place at that time. Because I always kind of wondered, well, where's the money coming from? And I found out. And in relation to that, they actually gave me this book. It's called a gratitude book. And every woman sent a message. And to me, this really represents Marty as well, because Marty has always been full of gratitude and love. So it came naturally from her and the guests.
What impact did you see Mary's Place have in the community during the time that you were involved?
Well, I think that from the beginning, that Mary's Place has been a responsible, accountable nonprofit. And we've seen that grow over the years. And I think that they set a high standard for nonprofits that are working in the world of homelessness. And I think it was a huge contribution.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen Mary's Place change?
Well, I've seen it change from uh, a Women's Day Center to then becoming shelter for families. And I distinctly remember a turning point when we found out that the, um, the hospitals, if a woman had given birth, that the hospitals would not allow the infant to go out of the hospital if the mother didn't have housing. And that's when we started taking on a new responsibility.
What was one event or time period you remember that was particularly important to the history of the organization? I know you just mentioned one, but are there others?
Well, I think it was the big step when we opened the shelter in the regrade, the small shelter on Third Avenue in the regrade. And that's when we had families. And it was also the time when the board members, and I'm not sure it was even a board or not, but the key people involved and volunteers spent a lot of time at that shelter. They would cook meals, I remember when somebody donated an entire scholastic library for the kids. There was a lot more interaction with the guests and I think staff and volunteers.
Mhm. Where and how would you like to see Mary's Place grow in the future?
Well, frankly, I mean, I think the ultimate goal is not to have Mary's Place. That we would hope that someday we would not be dealing with, homeless people in our society. Now, I do remember one other thing that was significant in the growth of Mary's Place, and that was when we bought our own building in Burien. And that's significant. And then the plans that we have to go forward and actually build, more housing. But and that's probably the reality. The reality is not that we'll never have, homeless people again.
Great. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add to this history interview?
Hmm. Well, I think a couple of things. I think our relationship with Amazon and with John Schottler and with Jeff Bezos has been extraordinary, and it's made a huge, huge difference, as well as Marty being a fabulous spokesperson representing Mary's Place, to the community and to the city. Um, and I'm grateful, extremely grateful to Marty for being as loving, caring, and gracious um, as she has been. And I hope that she hope and wish for her for a good future.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for sharing your memories.